Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Practice Center. My name is Joey Reese. Today, I'm going to be talking about I've forgiven, now what? As part of the Department of Human Services Lunch and Learn series. We've been chatting all summer long and all through winter and all the way into the new year about one aspect or another of the forgiveness process. And then some of you have chosen to join me in a workshop. So you've gone through a workshop or two, you've listened to the presentations, and maybe you're like me and sometimes catch yourself thinking, this feels fake or I'm a fraud. And I most often feel that when I'm posting like on social media, and I imagine like one of my villains or failed protectors seeing that post about how I've healed. And then they're imagining that we don't have a relationship. And because of the way that sometimes we conflate the definition of forgiveness with something else like reconciliation, that there are some people who could think that I'm a fake or a fraud. And then sometimes I internalize that. And so this is the thinking and the process that I go through to, one, get myself back into this present moment, and two, remind myself of the actual work that I'm doing, not the work that other people want me to do or the work that I'm not actually doing. And then three, what do I do about the and now what piece? Because we are in pain in relationships. So these people that have hurt us, what do we do with them if they're in our lives still? Or if we don't want them in our lives still, or they're not in our life and we do want them in our lives still. So what do we do with that? So now what? That's the question that I'm going to attempt to answer for you today. Forgiveness process. I've forgiven. Now what? It's really important to remember the definition of forgiveness. So often, even when people are in the midst of their work, I can hear the language and I can hear it in myself that says, I understand that forgiveness is for me and it's letting go, but then it's hard not to incorporate that other person. But that other person is still in my life. But they still are acting poorly. They're still hurting me. So those are two different questions. Those are two different scenarios. You taking care of your own internal health, and then what to do with the people in your life. And have you made the decision to keep them as part of your inner circle? Or have you chosen to let them go and not have a relationship with them? Those are two separate questions. I first start by remembering what forgiveness is and what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is for me. It's about the peace that I feel when I let go of stories that no longer serve me. I was lugging around stories from when I was a child, when I was a teen, when I was a young adult, and I was lugging them into this present moment. So there was very little bandwidth for me to actually live the life that I wanted to live. So this idea of forgiveness that we are working on is about letting go so that I can heal, so that I can be in this present moment, that I can be the hero of my own story. And it's not about my offenders, that I don't even have to have them in my life or in my conversations anymore if I don't want to. So that's the first thing. Whenever I catch myself thinking, oh, Joey, you're a fraud, or are you being a fraud? Or, oh, other people are going to think you are a fraud because you haven't reconciled all these relationships. I have to remember this is not reconciliation work that I'm doing. It's forgiveness work I'm doing, letting go. That it is a choice that I'm making to feel better about the life that I'm living now, and that I'm consistently practicing the skills that I've learned. So this idea of reconciliation or coming back together, or just because they're my parent, just because they're my kid, just because they're my blah, 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 whoever, just because, those no longer serve me. So you decide, do you mean reconciliation or do you mean forgiveness? Then the second piece is I remember that any choice that I'm going to make is basically a choice for peace or love. Or on the other side, or I'm making a choice for conflict or perpetuating my fears. No matter what it is that I'm choosing, do I want this person in my life? There's an answer that's going to lead me to peace, and there's an answer that's going to lead me to conflict. I can feel that inside. You guys have heard me in the workshops, if you've done any work with me at all, that I say above all else, this is a work about getting to know ourselves better. And what I know is that again and again and in groups, most of us are unaware of a lot of the ways that we're living and thinking. So what I mean to say is that I don't know myself very well. And I would venture to guess that you are on some sort of journey of getting to know yourself better too. So how could anyone else outside of myself possibly know anything about my fears or loves or conflicts or peace? Yeah, so to even think that somebody else is out there judging me and judging me correctly is a falsity. So what I try to come back to is remembering that any choice that I'm making, whether it's about what I'm going to eat, how I'm going to work out, how I'm going to show up, who I'm going to call that day, what I'm going to do for work, essentially at the bottom line, I'm going to feel some sort of peace or love, or I'm going to feel some sort of conflict or some sort of battle inside of me. So I try and clean out all of my stories as best I can so that I can really hear and listen to myself. When I think about my villains and I imagine like renewing or rekindling a relationship, if I feel constricted and I feel yucky, then I probably am guessing that no matter how much I try to muscle that relationship, that it probably is not going to lead me to peace. And there's going to be some level of resentment or regret for me. So think about that. Even if we don't do any more work, just imagine renewing that relationship with that villain or failed protector. How do you feel? Is there some avenue that can allow you to feel at peace? Then I would say maybe it's worth a renewal conversation or reconciliation conversation. But if it's an absolute no and the door closes, then it's my job to kind of honor that. So when we're talking about the power of awareness and choice, it's not just one choice. I'm not asking myself to make that choice for reconciliation and that will be it. I also have to know that every choice has many components and many layers. So my intention matters. And so my intention, I usually don't do it just based on that one individual. I think about what is my intention in the kind of relationship that I want in my life generally. So generally speaking, the kind of people that I want in my life are people who challenge me, who love me, who accept me unconditionally, who I'm excited to see, who don't make it so difficult. There are some people that it feels like hard work to be in relationship with them. My intention is that I don't have time for that. Now, this is not a matter of right or wrong. This is a matter of what is going to lead me to feel more peaceful. And this is my honest answer at this moment. And so then I can pay attention to the kind of relationships that I have in my life and make some overt decisions around them. So if I don't understand my intention, then it's going to be difficult to focus my attention. So it's intention and intention, both of them either are leading to love or peace or conflict or fear. And then I have to do some thinking around the meanings of different relationships. So when I think about parents, I did have that fairy tale version of parents are supposed to be there no matter what and love you unconditionally and accept you and care about you and ask you all the right questions for you to really learn and get to know yourself. Partners are supposed to save me from all of my past shit that my parents like screwed up. So the meanings that I had given to certain kinds of relationships were really messed up. And I had never considered that I had given or accepted the meanings that I had just acquired along my life. So now in the past few years, definitely, I've really done some deciphering of what certain relationships mean to me, the meaning of those words. So parents, what does that mean? Well, they're people. They're people that are doing the best they can at their life. And the question is, do I want a relationship with that particular person? Right? Even if they have a title of parent, they're a person, right? Relationships, really thinking about what kind of partnerships that I want to enter into, what kind of friendships that I want has been really interesting because a lot of what I kind of had in the back of my mind isn't really what I wanted. And to come to a knowing and an understanding about that has been important. So what kind of relationship, what does a partner or a significant other mean? What kind of role have you relegated to them? And do you know that that's what you've done? I think this is really important in terms of choice, understanding, and awareness. And then based on that meaning, my attitude followed. So if I thought as I used to think that partners should just come in and make me feel whole and understand that I have a lot of pain and deal with my nonsense. The first indication that they didn't want to do that, oh my God, I would get so violently angry. I would be so like let down, but in a way that was felt earth shattering. You know, this person that was supposed to be my life partner or husband or somebody that I had my babies with, like, where did I get the idea that they were supposed to be my everything? And yet I know that that's how I entered a lot of relationships. No wonder they failed. So now I think about, ooh, what do I want to do? What does an X mean? And how do I want to manage that? So really clarifying the meaning of these roles that I have inadvertently given to folks. And then coming to some sort of awareness is important. So that meaning is really important because my attitude follows. So when I was told that I had such a terrible attitude, I think it's because I didn't have a lot of clarifications on the role of myself, the role of the people around me. I just, thinking back, man, I was an albatross in a lot of relationships. And I do feel a lot of guilt around that. My attitude followed the meaning that I'd given inadvertently because I was not paying attention and I was unaware. And then my response, I was pretty like a one-trick pony. Somebody would not live up to the expectations that I had for them. And immediately my attitude would be one of just torching that relationship. And then that was my response. So I would do that in terms of yelling, screaming, packing up, leaving. And that was my go-to. I just pack up and move. I just pack up and leave. I would say, get out. I would sever. I would stop talking. I would shun. Yeah, no wonder I was suffering so much. That cycle that I had built for myself of not having any attentions and then paying attention to all the horrible things and all the ways that things go wrong, and then not clarifying the meanings of roles, my own role included, and then being led by my attitude and then behaving so poorly really kept me in conflict and fear. And I perpetuated that all the way into my adulthood. So recognizing that I have some power, especially when I'm aware of the choices that I'm making, and that awareness then gives me more power, has been really freeing. So first, clarify that forgiveness work is really about me and gaining this kind of power, and that power comes through awareness. So those are the first two things that I think about. And then I think about what really facilitates connections and relationships and what facilitates separation. So when I think about both directions, like, am I facilitating connections? And then in the people around me, these villains, these past villains and failed protectors, if they have some of these skills, so I feel this from them or not, matters. Acceptance. You know, we talk a lot about unconditionalness when we talk about acceptance. When I think about like some of the partnerships that I've been in, I've heard that I'm a lot. People like, or these past men have liked being with me. I look good enough. I'm smart enough. I'm enough unless I'm in pain. And then, you know, that attitude and the behaviors that I just shared with you. Yeah, I have not been accepted in that kind of craziness. Yeah. So who knows which came first? Did I leave or did they push me away? I don't know. But I do know that this idea of acceptance and really learning how to accept myself and be connected with myself is the first step before I can connect with another human. So I've really been focusing on which part of me do I ignore and what does it mean to embrace all of me and accept all of myself coming home. Empathy, taking responsibility, knowing that I can learn from anyone and that I can also be a teacher to anyone. The idea of equality, authenticity, trust, and love. Those are the ideas that really facilitate connection, both with ourselves and with the people around us, and then the greater world, right? And so this takes a lot of work and a lot of focus. And while I'm doing this, and I'm extending. It's not a one-way street. It's not a one-way street. There are folks who do only want me to prove my worth through work or what I can do for them. Those people don't have a place in my life anymore. And I'm okay with letting that go. And there have been some really significant relationships that I have let go and severed because I don't feel at peace with them. I don't feel that sense of love from my heart space for them, right? And out of billions and billions of people, I get some say in who I have a relationship with, no matter their title. So this column on the separation list: judgment, guilt, criticism, comparison, fear, blame, advice, and expectation. I've already used them a couple of times before this list even came up. These have been my go-tos for a long time. So I've been in practice for a long time. So it takes a little while. And so above all else, having some empathy and some compassion for myself, while I let some of these things go and I retrain and relearn some of the things that'll foster connection. I remember that I need to give myself a little bit of grace when I falter here. Yeah. And that the relationships that I am renewing right now, and the relationships that I've chosen to release, that is my present moment. I don't know what that'll look like in 5 years or 10 years. So I can't answer for that. All I can answer for is for right now in this moment. So take a look at, what are your connections like? Do you feel this sense of connection to yourself? And then to what degree can you extend that to the people that you're either thinking about renewing or releasing that relationship with? Because the steps are simple. To remember the definition of forgiveness, that's pretty simple. To remember that we have very simple choices to make, and it's really about love or conflict, that's pretty simple. To remember that there are certain things that I can remind myself and work on to lead towards better and stronger connection, those are pretty simple. What is not simple is me. I'm a complex human being. Me. That overwhelm I described at the beginning this is how I picture it inside of me, that there is a piece of me that is love, the essence, that purity, that little thing that we were all born with, that magic, that miracle that boomed us into existence. That essence is still true. I'm living this really complicated human life, and I've had experiences that have separated me from a felt sense of safety, felt sense of dignity, and definitely I have not experienced a whole lot of belonging. All of that is what we call trauma in this work that we're doing. And traumas come in all kinds of different forms: big trauma, big T trauma, and little t, little trauma. But the bottom line is, if you are experiencing those felt sense of disconnection from safety, dignity, and belonging, then that can be considered a trauma story. Some of us have support and skills and the right kind of situation and the internal connections that allow us to let go of those stories pretty quickly. Now, if we have not gotten the appropriate support, if we don't know the skills, if that has been not taught to us and not supported in letting go, then we might be carrying those stories with us from the past, and that ruminating on that story, taking it really personally, blaming somebody, something, some external factor for the condition of my current life, that is what we call suffering. It's that space between the reality that I perceive and the expectation that I had, and that disparity makes me sad, mad, angry, depressed. Makes me go, why me? And I think about that a lot. Then I ruminate. So that suffering is what I've been doing for a long time, around my origin story, my biological family, and living in an orphanage and being adopted by a family that I didn't feel connected to. Those were all stories of suffering that I carried on into my adulthood. And as a result of the trauma and the suffering, I've created some protective mechanisms that make me go, you know what, this is how I'm going to live my life and protect myself to the best, to my best ability. Because I was lacking skills, some of them actually created more pain, like isolation. Because I suffered in relationships with people and the most primary people in my life, I started being that one, that island. Yeah, I will do all of the things on my own. I don't ask for help. I will suffer in silence. And in fact, when I think about like reaching out for help, that feels like more, it feels more overwhelming. Like I think about the times when I feel like I've reached out and I've had a door slammed shut or people leave. I feel like people have seen me in pain and purposely have left me. So why would I ask? Why would I ask? It's like adding insult to injury, as they say, or pouring salt in the wound. So my protective mechanism has been to do it on my own. And then I feel alone. And then that perpetuates the stories of suffering, which is stories of being alone. And then it reminds me of the trauma stories when I was separated from people and alone, right? So it's this vicious cycle. This is vicious cycle. So this is all of me that I'm bringing into this healing work. I don't claim to be a saint or to know it all. I do know that I am a complex bag of life, and that through that, I do want to feel better, and that there are some tools that we can use to actually feel better. So when I'm not doing that well, when I'm not applying the skills well, when I am feeling like I'm making the choice to just shut down, one, I pat myself on the back and I'm super proud of myself because I am aware that I am doing that. Remember, awareness is really key. And then the second thing is I give myself a chance to kind of breathe around this complexity, that I am not broken the way that I used to talk about myself before. I'm just broken. I do go, yeah, it's my crusty outer layer coming out. Okay, what are you scared of? Okay, who can really help? Because there are some people I think that I was dumping my stories to that couldn't really help me. I was just emotionally dumping on them. So now I'm like, is there somebody that I really want to talk to? Are there people that actually do feel better? And, I can say yes, there are some people, not all, of course. And in fact, just yesterday, I was like, I want to talk to somebody, but I don't want to just talk to any old person. And this one person came to mind that the last time we talked about similar things, like there was it was so dynamic. It wasn't all just, oh, poor you. It was like, as they asked questions and then they shared, and then I asked questions. And it was this like, I felt light at the end. I felt better. And it wasn't just about dealing with my problems. And so that's the person I called yesterday. And it felt really good. We didn't actually talk, but just in going inside and asking myself the better question and then coming up with an answer and then acting on it really made me feel better. It was, and that's what I'm seeing more and more and more for myself. So I have some grace around not having everything look perfectly, but working towards this complexity and treating myself with like lots of loving care. While I'm working to create a different kind of life. So some of the other additional things that I think about for myself when I'm considering renewing or releasing a relationship is, what have my boundaries been? What are my values? Right? Because if I have leaky boundaries and I let people have all kinds of access to me, my lack of boundaries is what's helping facilitate that kind of relationship. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God. So maybe it's just about showing up my boundaries, letting that person know that, hey, I appreciate this relationship, but you can't have access to me all the time. I wouldn't say it like that, right? But it would be appropriate yeses and nos, and appropriate explanations, and appropriate I feel statements, those kinds of things. So really allowing myself to consider my own boundaries and taking personal responsibility is important. What are my values? How do you react and respond? So this is about getting to know yourself. How do you react or respond to these people that you think about in your stories? And this isn't about overt action only. This is about how do you respond or react? Because my body does not fake it very well. So when I think about somebody and I go, oh, that tells you something. That tells you something. So it might warrant some excavating. So notice how I react and respond. That's what I do. Consider that for yourself. Are you aware of your patterns? It's really important to know, what do you think? How do you feel? And then what do you normally do or don't do about it? And are they in some sort of alignment? Are you aware of that? Do you even know what you want? Do you even know what your hopes are? Do you even know what your desires are? Or are you at the mercy of the people around you? It's remarkable to me how many adults I ask, what do you love doing? What do you enjoy doing? And they can't answer that question. Here, I love competition. In this field, in this kind of work, or in this, I don't know, world that we live in now, and even in my adoptive family, right at the beginning, actually, that was like looked down upon. They used to go, oh God, you're so competitive. And I could see the disgust on their face. I really try to like dampen that down. Don't compete. Don't. I used to don't myself a lot around that. I'm getting emotional around that because, so heartbreaking. The bottom line is I love competition. I love watching competition. I love being competitive. I love being challenged like that. To me, it's a challenge that allows me to pull myself up. I love that. When I was trying to squash that down, I think I behaved poorly around loss. Because one, like I wasn't even supposed to like competition, but there is competition in daily life. And then I couldn't really live up to things. It was a mess. It was a mess of a story. And the other day, it just, this is coming to mind because the other day I was listening to a podcast. The host was talking about this person who was creating some sort of competition. And her comment was, God, why does everything have to be a competition? I like things to be fun. And in that moment, it clicked for me. I'm like, competition is fun for me. I love it. It is fun. And why should I be shamed to say that? And the thing is, the more I've leaned into this is just me. I love competing. If I'm going to create a challenge, I'm going to do it. If I want to participate, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to go hard. I'm good at a lot of things. I'm not going to be ashamed of that anymore. And that is fun. As a result, I'm a much better loser now. I'm a much better loser now. And I'm a much more graceful winner now because I'm not trying to be somebody I am not. So embracing all of me, the mess that is me, as well as this heart that is me and my stories that is me. One of the things that really has come out of clarifying what do I really like, I can be so much kinder and gentler just in general life if I'm not trying to hide a piece of me. So competition, it's like people can talk about people who enjoy competition like shit and it's okay. It's not. I enjoy it. I enjoy it. And I will forever like be a champion of it. I'm trying to figure out how I can have a forgiveness competition of some sort at this very moment. I'm going to try to figure it out. Okay. So taking authentic responsibility is just some of what I've just described. When I was a sore and poor loser, there are some apologies that I needed to make because I did not behave well through my life. Now I do. Now I do much better. So admitting, apologizing, acknowledging, and making amends, those are some things to consider. We're not all saints. So if we're thinking of renewing a relationship, know that we've played a role in whatever that conflict was. And so there might be some authentic acknowledging and taking responsibility for our own role that we might have to do before we can renew that relationship. Even though we were wronged, guaranteed in that story, if both parties are humans, there's some mess in there and there's some piece that I can take responsibility for. Speaking from the heart brain is really important. So many people know so much. Knowing is not enough. So what does it mean to really feel from the heart brain and then speak from that space is important. And then again, always going back to acknowledging the power of awareness and choice. So very specifically, let me take you through a couple of my own villains and failed protectors. So definitely my adoptive family has come up. There have been some friends that I've lost along the way. My bio mom that I found about 10 years ago. Right now, I'm currently in the search for my father, who is currently unknown. And it's crazy to me when I think about this man not having had children. So like when I think about doing a search for my father, I am absolutely searching for siblings. It's unfathomable that I would not have. So I have some feelings about that. And then I have a couple of significant exes in my life. And so I think about renewing and releasing some of those relationships. So this is how I think about this. So taking any one of these, I think about what is my intention here? Well, my intention is to have meaningful, connected relationships with people in my life. That would mean these people too. Or I would release that. If it doesn't meet that intention of a meaningful, connected relationship with people in my life, then they're automatically out. So a lot of my adoptive family, I have not had a relationship with in years. And when I think about that, and I break it down further, I go, well, do they meet this idea of the kind of people in my life? They don't. What I pay attention to is all the little ways, even when things weren't terrible, I didn't feel a connection or a warmth or love. That's real for me. I think we were sold a lot of stories about what adoptive families would be for us when we were in Korea. We were threatened by that, and we were also made promises. So, for example, we were told that if we didn't behave, they would send us back, and we did not want to live in the conditions we were living in. But then we were also promised that people in America were so rich and happy. They all like held hands and skipped down the street. Like we were told some crazy stuff. So what an adoptive family was supposed to be in my mind when I was young and what I feel like I got was totally different. Now, as an adult, I can look back and go, well, yeah, families, we don't owe each other anything. We really don't. And these people really did the best they can. I do absolutely believe that. And they're strangers. And I never felt this connection. So because on paper, they are my adoptive family, they're not my family. So they're just strangers to me. And so my attitude, I can just kind of respectfully let it go. I don't have a charge anymore because I was able to clarify the meaning. And so my behavior is that I don't wish them ill at all, ever. I don't. But I don't need any communication with them. And I do prevent any and all communication from a few of them. I have some relationship with some of them. So I feel at peace at this current moment around those relationships. My relationships with my bio mom is a little bit more complex because there's an added barrier of language. I don't speak any Korean, and that's an internal battle I'm still having. That my intention is I want to have a better relationship with my mom. So one of those things means that I will need to learn Korean. I have started and stopped probably 4 significant times in the last 10 years. And so I really have to look at that in order for me to feel at peace, because I don't feel at peace right now around that. The meaning, my bio mom, man, we'll never have a lovey, cozy relationship. She's not like that. I don't need her to be like that, but I do want to be in her space more. I do want to see her after the pandemic and we can travel to Korea. I do expect to be going back. And I am much more at peace than when I first met her. It was a terrible meeting and we had to sever our relationship for about 10 years. I ignored her for 10 years. I have grown tremendously since then. And so I really think about what my responses will be. And so some of the actions that I'm going to have to take is around language and actually traveling, right? But I have the intentions to do that. So I would like to continue to work on renewing that relationship. There are some friends that, I'm just coming to the realization now that over the years, I've called and I've never gotten a call back. There's one that most recently I called, and, all of this is what's going on in my life. And she asked me not one question about myself. She spent the whole time talking about this new thing, and I don't know, just about other people that I don't know, but not once asked me anything about me in that whole conversation. And I thought at the end of that, I thought this was supposed to be my friend for life. And at the end of that conversation, I had this like settle, like this piece that came over that said, this is stupid. This is stupid. I get nothing out of this relationship. It feels like an obligation. And it made me sad. I wanted that person to care, because I do care. But it is a relationship that I have chosen to release. Exes. I think this is a tricky one. This is one that can get caught up because I'm a single woman. And if I don't work out these choice layers, it will impact my future relationships. And so holding on to resentment in one area, we think we can just close our hearts off to this one thing. But if I close off my heart to this one thing, my heart is closed off. That's the point. And so I think about, how do I want to let some of those stories go? How do I really want to clarify my meaning and adjust my attitude, and then take the appropriate response? And ultimately, what I've come down to is that I want fun and real meaningful connections with all people. That includes future partners. I have stopped the categorization, like certain things with friends, certain things with adults, certain things with, no, I want connected relationships with all people, including partners. Yeah. So the way that I choose to renew or release is to just take some time and really allow myself to center, and then be curious about where I am, where I want to go, and then really notice how I feel when I think about these people. Do I feel drawn? Do I feel repelled? Do I feel peaceful? Do I feel conflicted? And then I move accordingly and really make some decisions to act in alignment with what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. Because if these things come up, I freeze up, shut down, talk too much, prattle on. If I'm not able to really see that other person, and I oversimplify the issue and boil it down to like that one little argument, I talk from this place of disconnected. I lose sight of the goal, which is connected relationships. I fall into this defensive combat mode, like having to like justify myself, or I betray one of my boundaries or values. Then that's not a person that I need to be in relationship with, at least not at that moment, until I can get myself under emotional like management, regulation. Yeah. These are good indicators that that person is creating conflict or fear for you, and that we might need to do some additional work before we can make some choices around renewing or releasing that relationship. Because this is what it really takes. And we need to have some space in order to figure out if we have willingness. You'll notice that that is the word that starts off a lot of these statements. What is your willingness to be vulnerable, to really show up, to be you, to get some feedback? So the opposite of that pitfall list is this. So I want to be in relationships where I can have courageous conversations. In my list of villains or failed protectors, there are some that I can renew and we can do this with, and there are others that we cannot, that I cannot. So consider this list for yourself. Boundary work is really important. So I touched on that earlier, and I want to just quickly go through this. Because in true connections, we really do need to have clear boundaries, not to understand my own and to uphold them, but then to understand somebody else's and not feel like you're being slighted, right? So this is from the holistic psychologist's work. And I have that name of the book at the end of the slides here. When I used to think about boundaries, I used to just think about boundaries, just like one boundary, right? And it was really interesting and helpful for me to learn that there are different types of boundaries and that naming them is helpful. So physical body, like how people have access to me physically, how I'm taking care of myself physically. That's really important. Resources, how I'm spending my time, money, energy. And then mental, emotional, my beliefs and values in emotional world. So who gets to determine where my lines are? And then how am I articulating them? And then are people respectful? If people cannot respect my boundaries as set, then I might need to relook at that relationship. So the categories around those types of boundaries is being too rigid. So on one end of the spectrum, too rigid. On the other end, too loose. So my goal is to become more flexible and somewhere in the middle. But here are some examples of what that might mean if you need a little bit more clarity. But I really suggest that you look at how to do the work. And again, I will post that at the end if you are wanting to dive a little bit deeper into your own boundary work. And there's lots of other trainings around boundaries that might be helpful as well. So I always look at this list and go, okay, today, where am I? So on the days when I'm feeling a little bit of a mess, I don't sleep very well on those days. I don't eat very well. So that physical boundary is very loose. And that does not make me feel well. Yeah, so I have to work a little bit harder on getting my physical boundaries together. So how am I feeding myself, sleeping, moving my body? Like I have to take care of this physical vessel. That's where the rest of the work is being done, inside of this body, right? So I kind of look at this slider and just take accounting so I can become aware of where I am, right? I have to take emotional, mental, physical responsibility for myself before I think about a relationship with somebody else. So how are your boundaries? How's your boundary work going? And above all else, if all of that becomes too much, I always remember to come down and connect with my breath, my stillness, my calm. And try not to think so much. Try not to figure it out so much. I just come and breathe in a way that allows me to feel safe. Where I can hear myself a little bit better, where I can become a little bit more aware of my thoughts and my emotions, my hopes, my desires. This is always my touchstone. Come back to breath. And then if I'm ready, then I can dig a little bit deeper into, okay, am I really taking responsibility for my own words, my actions, my emotions? Where have I let people down? Do I need to stop making so many promises? How do I need to manage my schedule better so that I can keep them? Where are my leaky boundaries? Where am I too rigid? What are my patterns of behavior? How are they contributing to the quality of my life? And am I living up to the values that I say that I want to live up to? So one of my values for sure is kindness, and kindness, not niceness, kindness, meaning clarity, kindness. So there were often that I would actually use that and be spiteful. So I would say, I'm not trying to be nice. I'm trying to be kind. And kind means clear. And I'm clearly letting you know that you suck is kind of basically how I used it. And the thing is, I never felt good about that. And I did have a moment of reckoning around that, going, God, Joey, this is really a value. Then what does it really mean? And how do you live up to it that makes you feel at peace? That was the question that was more important, not just telling myself that I suck. That's not helpful. So to go, okay, kindness with a little bit of humility and gentleness, like that that is what makes me feel more at peace, not spiteful, calling it kindness. Yeah. So to really clarify my own values and how I want to live up to it is helpful in relating to other people. So I was looking a lot of value words and going, oh, this is helpful. I care about that. I don't care about that. I like that, not like that. And then until I can whittle it down to like a list of 3 or 4 top values. So do you know your 3 or 4 or 5 top values? Do you know how you're living up to them? When you live up to them, do you feel that sense of love or that sense of peace? That's how I might narrow it down to the value words. I mean, we're constantly signing contracts. If we've had a job at an organization, everybody has mission statements and value statements, and we all sign on the dotted line as if it's no big deal, but it is a big deal. Yeah, if we are not living up to the values that somehow we have rattling on in there, there is some sort of a disconnect. So hopefully you find this exercise valuable. Find your value words. And then clarify from there your hopes, wishes, and heart's desires. So from the beginning, when I would address my villain as their villain, right? That person failed me. When I have been heard and I've done some of this work and I've excavated and let some stuff go, I have some more space. And in that space, I can honor that person's own journey. And I don't have to call them a villain anymore. Maybe I can call them by their name. I can address a little bit more like what happened. And I can identify what happened versus they tried to sabotage me. Sometimes we say that. Well, that's not really what happened, right? Sometimes people are just driving along and changing lanes. And in our world, we're like, they're cutting me off. Well, that's our interpretation, right? But they change lanes and they, maybe they almost missed their stop. They're in a hurry, they're distracted. But most often it wasn't about you. So really clarifying this language around what happened versus your hyperbolic interpretation of what happened to you is sometimes helpful. And then what do you hope or wish would have happened? Like to tap into that heart center is really important. Do you even know what you wanted? Right? And then to take the further steps of, do you need to take action? Do you not need to take action? Like follow that train of thought all the way to the end. And then if you decide you do need to take action, and some of it might be admitting your role, apologizing, making amends. And just real quickly, I just need to say those apologies, man, there's some terrible, terrible apologies out there. Above all else, please remove the buts. Yeah. If an explanation is needed, then really speak from that heart center. But the but is unnecessary. We talk about the unconditional nature a lot, and we often talk about it, or I hear it often when it's talked about from the point of not receiving it. My parents didn't give me unconditional love. But how often are we walking around unconditionally at peace, unconditionally loving? And the goal isn't for us to do this all perfectly, but consider that. Do I need all the conditions in my life to be perfect before I can be happy or joyful or at peace? I mean, then we're headed for a long, whatever life we have left of suffering. Some of peace comes in knowing that we can choose this state of being no matter what, that we can choose to look at the conditions in our lives, the relationships, and choose peace. It might be accompanied by difficult action, but we can still choose that internal state of peace. So the next time you use the word unconditional, just notice how you're using it and to what degree you can unconditionally choose peace. Because this is how suffering happens, right? It's how I see my life and the expectation that didn't get met. Take it personally, I ruminate and I blame. So knowing that we don't have to do that, knowing that we can let some of this go has been helpful. And I re-challenge myself because I like challenges, I re-challenge myself to feel and to feel at peace and let go of that story that I create in my brain through ongoing attitudinal healing work. So mindful forgiveness was really helpful to help me kind of dismantle the pieces of my story and to really feel heard. That was important. And then attitudinal healing and the principles in attitudinal healing is what has helped me not create new stories moving forward. So attitudinal healing support groups are happening right now as I'm making this video. So hopefully you'll find one, or Attitudinal Healing International has healing groups in different languages, all kinds of time that might be more appropriate for where you are. So Attitudinal Healing International is a great resource. So these 12 principles has allowed me to kind of shift my perspective as these stories come up. So when I think about a relationship that I want to renew, I sometimes think about that one issue, that one time that they hurt me, that one time. And then if I really want to renew this, then it's important for me to look at the whole of our relationship and not that fragment of that fight or that fragment. And so attitudinal healing principle number 10, as you see here, is we can focus on the whole of life rather than the fragment. That is true for that person too. So when I look at our relationship, sometimes I can get caught up in that one time you disrespected me, that one time you didn't do what you said you were going to do. But if I can zoom out and look at the whole, where I too didn't show up 100% of the time. So we can have a little grace for one another, right? That's been helpful to know that if I am see myself as a constant giver or a supporter or a caretaker, this attitudinal healing principle number 3, giving and receiving are the same. It helps me to go, okay, as I'm giving, what am I getting back? What am I getting back? And to allow myself those thoughts and to see in the whole of that picture, see what I'm receiving in that exchange has been important, so that it doesn't always feel like I'm giving, never getting anything back. That's why I'm going to be burnt out, right? That's not helpful. If somebody is actually sucking all your energy, then you might need to release that relationship until you figure out your boundaries. Or you could look at it differently. What are you getting back? And is there something that you're not seeing that you could see now? So consider using this, the principles, and see how you feel around certain situations. Yeah. And then there's lots of different ways to practice. There's lots of entry points. There's lots of moving parts, because the steps, each one of them can be simple, but all together, thinking about it all together in the context of this complex human being, it can feel overwhelming. So what one thing can you take away right now and practice today that might help you feel better in either renewing a relation, renewer or releasing a particular relationship? Or what one thing can you do in order to renew the relationship that you have with yourself and strengthen that connection? So I would love for you to walk away with acknowledging that you will practice one thing today. And then here are the resources that I use quite regularly, but definitely some of the components from today's talk has come from Forgive for Good from Dr. Fred Luskin, Love is Letting Go of Fear and Attitudinal Healing from Dr. Jerry Jampolsky, How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LaPera, and I'm the Practice Center. And we're doing work, presentations, workshops, support groups, and there are many of us, many facilitators within the Practice Center that are doing ongoing work. And we would love for you to join us in this conversation, because knowing is not enough. The magic is in the practice. So I invite you to practice with us. Thank you, everyone.